Hey everybody, welcome back to this COVID Connect series about the kings of Israel. Now, yesterday we looked at the origins of the office of King of Israel, and we talked about how God did not originally intend for Israel to have an earthly human king. This was because God was the only king Israel really needed. But the people demanded that God give them a human king because they didn't trust God to protect and lead them on his own. So God gave in and appointed the first king, King Saul, whose story is told in the first book of Samuel starting in chapter 9. Now, the irony is that Saul actually didn't really want to be king too. In fact, when he found out that God had named him king, his first reaction was to run off and hide in a big pile of luggage. But once Saul became king, he actually started off as a good king. He led the armies well, he worshipped God, and God even granted him a little bit of prophetic power. The problem, though, is that Saul let all of his success go to his head. He forgot that God was the one who had given him his power and his office and all of his success, and he became focused on himself and what he had achieved, and whether or not people liked him. He was more worried about the people liking him than he was about doing the right thing. So Saul started to disobey God more and more seriously, and as a result of this, God chose somebody to be Saul's successor. He picked a shepherd boy you might have heard of named David. Now, even at this point, Saul still could have changed his ways. He could have gone back to God and been a good king. But instead of doing that, he let himself become taken over by envy for David, and he became consumed with paranoia and fear and jealousy. So he gathered up his army and literally started hunting David across the desert, running from cave to cave to cave. And during this chase, Saul kept falling into worse and worse sins, like massacres, starting wars, and even witchcraft. While Saul was doing this, the Philistine army, Israel's enemies, came in and invaded, and they destroyed Saul's army and killed his sons. And out of despair, Saul committed suicide. Now, Saul's story truly is a tragedy. It's one of the most tragic in the Old Testament. And the saddest thing about it is that it never had to be this way. Even after Saul fell into sin, he still could have turned around. He could have changed his ways and gone back to God. And God would have been not only willing, but eager to forgive him. In fact, there's even a really haunting episode where David comes across Saul in a cave, and Saul doesn't notice him. So David has a chance to kill Saul and end this whole thing. But David refuses to do that, because he recognizes that God has still chosen Saul, and that despite Saul's sins, he still has God's mark upon his soul. And if that's true for Saul, imagine how true it must be for the rest of us too. God has chosen us. He's picked out each and every one of us by name, and he's imprinted his mark on our souls. So know that, and know that because God has picked us, because he loves us, he is always willing to take us back. He will always forgive us and always make us whole.